The drive to White Pines Lodge was supposed to be the highlight of my lonely summer vacation. I had recently broken up with my boyfriend of 3 years, Ryan, and craved a retreat that was far removed from the bustle of city life. White Pines, nestled deep within the Canadian wilderness, promised serenity with its isolated cabins and the promise of peaceful introspection near a sprawling lake. The journey began pleasantly enough, cutting through picturesque landscapes, past a smattering of small towns. But as the paved roads gave way to gravel and the GPS signal grew spotty, unease began to creep in. I reassured myself that this was part of the charm: no urban noise, no incessant phone notifications. By the time I arrived, the late afternoon sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows over the dense thickets of pine that bordered the lodge. An elderly woman named Doris greeted me with a warm smile at the check-in desk. She handed me a heavy brass key, attached to it a wooden tag engraved with the number 4. "Welcome," she said, her voice a honeyed drawl. "If you need anything, call the main line, but reception might be sketchy." Cabin 4 was a short walk down a narrow dirt path lined with whispering pines. The cabin was modest, rustic, its wooden porch creaking underfoot as I unlocked the door. Inside, the smell of cedar was comforting, the large windows framing a serene view of the lake. Its placid surface mirrored the bruised pink of the sunset, a sight so tranquil it momentarily put my mind at ease. As I settled in, I noticed that Cabin 4 had old-world charm, every corner meticulously swept, every piece of furniture polished to a warm glow, the kind of detail one doesn't often see anymore. I spent the evening sitting on the porch, a glass of wine in hand, scribbling thoughts into my journal. Occasionally, I'd glance up to see the last traces of sunlight succumb to night. The forest teemed with life, insects chirping in a steady rhythm, the cool breeze rustling the overhead branches. Around midnight, a restless feeling nudged me awake. The cabin was enveloped in darkness, the silence so profound that my heartbeat was the only discernible sound. I rolled over, checking my phone out of habit. No bars, no messages. For that moment, lying there in complete isolation, I felt the press of loneliness sharper than ever, but sleep claimed me swiftly, mercifully. The following morning arrived gray and wet. Rain pattered on the roof, a comforting lullaby as I lazed in bed. By afternoon, the skies cleared, and I decided to explore the surroundings. I mapped a mental route, just a small hike around the lake, nothing too ambitious. The air was crisp, its scent invigorating, saturated with the fragrance of pine and damp earth. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Birds would suddenly quiet as if signaling my intrusion, and shadows danced eerily at the periphery of my vision. Assuming it was just a matter of unaccustomed nerves heightened by isolation, I pressed on. The trail looped back to the lake, where I found a small, abandoned rowboat tied to a dilapidated dock. It rocked gently with the water's movement, an invitation. Feeling adventurous, I untied it, carefully stepping aboard, pushing away from the shore with the tips of my fingers. The lake was glass smooth, reflecting the canopy above with dreamlike clarity. As I floated there, a peculiarly gnawing feeling gripped me. I was certain I'd seen a figure walking along the edge of the water earlier. But after scanning the perimeter, I shrugged it off, attributing the impression to my mind's tricks, just solitude playing out as fear. I knew dusk was near despite the bright sky, and lingered a moment longer before paddling back to shore. That's when I heard it, a sound like muffled voices carried by the wind. It was distant, unintelligible, and yet the tone was unmistakably urgent. Scanning the shoreline again, nothing. Unease gripped me. Maybe it was locals or another guest. Still, I rowed swiftly back to the dock, securing the boat tightly. Back in the cabin, the dimming light made the interior feel cold and lonely. I drew the curtains, staved off the chill with a hot cup of tea. I perched on a window seat next to a bookshelf lined with random paperbacks, the act of reading an attempt to anchor my wayward thoughts. It was then that I noticed an envelope tucked between 2 books, yellowed with age. Curiosity won over. Inside, it contained a series of handwritten notes from a Bianca fairy dated almost 20 years ago. Her tidy script described a recurring dream, unsettling in its detail. She spoke of watching from within the lake at night, hearing a beckoning call from the depths, seeing shadowy figures mirrored on the water. The hair on my arms rose involuntarily as I realized the parallels with my experience. I placed the notes aside, willing myself to dismiss their unsettling nature. Thoughts of leaving the cabin stormed my mind that night, but the lateness of the hour, coupled with the consuming exhaustion, kept me anchored to the bed. As sleep pulled me under once more, I awoke to the unmistakable sound of soft knocking. Bleary-eyed and pulse quickened, I listened. It came again, a timid, almost apologetic tap. On edge, I tiptoed towards the door, fighting the urge to fling it open. Instead, I glanced through the peephole, nothing but the innocuous dark. Heart pounding, I whispered, "Who's there?" A pause followed, almost lengthy enough to convince me I'd imagined it. Then, an exhalation, close, but on the other side of the door, a voice barely above a whisper. "Help." I yanked the door open recklessly, fear overtaken by concern. Cold air rushed in, but the porch was empty. The forest loomed silent and still. It was so quiet. The absence of even the smallest sound ate at my sanity. I stepped outside, calling out, my voice swallowed by the void. As I retreated, the peculiar sense that something unseen was retreating with me, or rather watching me no longer, lingered. Sleep was elusive, coming only with the promise of dawn creeping through narrow gaps in the curtains. I woke to a shaken resolve, desperate to abandon my retreat and return to familiar territory. Still, when the daylight surged, completely unfurled, there was a comforting humanity to the sunlit dwelling. I packed hastily, the loaded car serving as a promise of reprieve. Doris was at the front desk as I checked out, her demeanor unchanged. As I handed over the key, she eyed me knowingly, almost apologetically. "Don't stay away too long, dear," she said softly. "The forest can be lonely for some." Her words accompanied me, warily. Like the unfathomable shadows, I was all too eager to leave behind. Heading back to the city, I couldn't resist one last look in the rearview mirror. The lodge was already obscured by pine, though its eerie echo resided firmly in the recesses of my mind.